As a leader, have you ever thought to yourself, well, no one ever took the time to train me on how to train my team? Common question. But with a lot of managers out there, or even yourself right now listening, if you've ever been frustrated that your team just is not doing what you want them to do and you don't know how to fix it, well, I'm going to give you a tried and true training method that has not failed me ever. Really simple to follow, but it's going to increase the effectiveness of your team and your training. So let's dive in today of this episode of You're in Charge, and let me help you train your team. Now, the second piece to this conversation of dependent managers, when I was talking to a client of mine, and he brought this up to his managers, a few of the managers said, well, no one ever taught us how to train people. No one ever taught us how to do this. So let me just take a quick few seconds to explain a training process that I learned a long time ago that I've adapted and I've used for years and has been incredibly successful. I still have people reach back out to me with comments on social media and reconnect and say, Glenn, you know what? I still use that system that you taught me 20 years ago, and it's never failed me. Okay. Give you a little backstory of how this all started. In my 20s, late 20s, I was an actor in New York City, which meant that you were doing side jobs, odd jobs to make ends meet. And I waited tables. I grew up in the restaurant industry, meaning that was one of my first jobs. And I liked being in the restaurant industry. I cooked, I bartended, waited tables, hosted, you name it, I did it in the restaurant industry. So I was working in this mom and pop restaurant, and I said, I want to go to a fancier restaurant. Why? Because I had met some friends who were actors who were making way more money than me doing the same job waiting tables. I said, well, let me go and see what I could do. So I went to this restaurant. It was called Lola on 22nd Street between 5th and 6th Avenues. And I remember going in, it was in the afternoon when they were doing interviews, sat on the banquettes with a few people, and this woman came out and she handed everyone a sample menu and said, I need you to study this, come back tomorrow, we'll ask you some questions, and then we'll move on to the next stage. And I thought, okay. So what did I do? I went home and I memorized the menu, what went with what came with this. And that's what they asked you the next day. The very first question they asked you was, okay, what comes with this dish? What comes with that dish? Does this come with this? And those individuals who didn't know or didn't remember, they were let go. They said, that's fine. Because in their mind, if they didn't take the initiative to learn the menu, even the basics of the menu, then why would I put any time into them? So that's another good tip to vet out. And we'll talk in future episodes. And we'll bring on a guest about HR and hiring and interviewing. That'll help you as well. But that's a good way to, do you have some instant, sort of initial vetting process to get rid of some of the people who aren't even going to put in the effort. But the process was over the course of 5 days, and this is key. 5 days, they were going to train me how to wait tables. Now, I had said to the person who I was following on that first day, so the very first day you follow the waiter around, and they explained all of the things that they would do. And then I said, well, I've waited tables for a while. And they looked and they said, well, that's great. You understand how to wait tables, but I'm showing you how we do it here. And that always stuck with me as well. I know a lot of my clients are automotive dealers. I also do other sales types jobs as clients, and they bring in people with experience. But what they do is they let that person bring their experience into their business and do it their way versus saying, great, you understand this, but I'm going to make sure you understand how to work here, right? And so in that restaurant, this is the way that we do it. So first day I followed them. The next day when I followed them, they started asking me questions. Where do we go next? Now, what do we do? What they wanted to see was, did I remember it, and started to process the information. So I would say, no, we go over here, we do this, do this. Third day, I was in the kitchen to look at all of the food. So I went into all the different departments. I went behind the bar. I went into the kitchen, looking at how all the other pieces fit together in this restaurant. And then the fourth day, I started doing the job and someone was behind me and they would say, where are you going next? Where are you going? Where are you going? Now, for me, because I caught on and I understood and it seemed to be an easy system to follow, by the fifth day, they left me alone and let me go take my own, section of tables. But it stuck with me, this very simple process. They showed me what to do. They asked me questions. They watched me do it. Again, they asked me questions to make sure I knew what was going on. And then they let me go do it, but they would always keep following up and checking in with me. So how I've designed this process, it's basically 8 steps. So the first step, number 1, is making sure that you're going to tell people what they're going to do. So let's say, for instance, again, automotive dealership, I do a lot of consulting and we have our digital clients there. Let's say you are going to create a new sales script. Or better yet, you're going to have a new way to greet your customers when they come into your business. Great. So the what is, we are going to have a new way to greet our customers. Everyone goes, okay, now they're focused on what's going to happen. Number 2 is why. I need to explain to them why. We as people do not like being told what to do without understanding the why. We didn't like it as children when our parents said, just do it because I said so. We didn't like it then. We don't like it now. So understanding the why. Well, we feel that this is going to be a better experience. We feel that we're going to retain more of our customers or make the experience more special than our competitors by changing how we greet them. Great. Now, the third step is how. And there's 2 pieces to how. The first one is, how are we actually changing this, right? So maybe it's, well, when someone comes in, we're going to get up from behind our desk and come out and greet them and meet them at the front. And then we're going to bring them over to the desk. We're going to offer them something to drink or whatever the new strategy is. But we're talking about physical actions, right? Remember that actions cause results. So we have to figure out the actions that we're going to do in order to generate this new customer experience, this new feeling in the customers who we interact with. The other part of how is, how are we going to train? So we might turn around and say, okay, here's the new process written out. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, we're going to meet in the training room and we're going to role play and practice this, right? So the how was how we're going to train. Very similar to the restaurant handing me the menu and saying, tomorrow, please come back and we are going to quiz you on this. Now, again, if it's a script or it's something they need to memorize, make sure that you tell them, please memorize this. It's your responsibility. Now, that next day, here's the key. This is the important piece. Demonstrate. Don't assume they understand by just telling. That's one of the problems with creating a dependent workforce, right? Because we didn't train them correctly. We told them what to do, but the picture in our brain and the picture in their brain, 2 different things. Remember, as children, all of our education was shown, and then somebody watched what we did. You didn't tell your child how to throw a baseball. You showed them how to do a baseball. You didn't figure it out. The teacher didn't tell you how to do a math problem. They showed you how to do a math problem. Then you went up on the board and they watched as you did it and they guided you and gave you feedback. So demonstrate, show them how to do it, because that way it's very clear. I watch what you do. Then the next piece, right? The next step is role play, meaning flip it. So in this case, our scenario, I am the employee and someone is the customer and we role play. I show them what I want them to do. Then we flip it around. I'm the customer. You're the employee. And we practice. We practice until we get it right. The next step of this would be giving them feedback. You're adjusting, you're tweaking. That part was great. We need to do that, right? So we're constantly role playing. We're constantly figuring out how to do this. Now, once we do this, once we start doing that, then the next piece that we're going to end up doing is we want to get acceptance and acknowledgement. Now, you may turn around and say, well, Glenn, what do you mean acceptance and acknowledgement? Well, what we want to do is make sure they understand what we're talking about. The reason is there are some people that are very talented at mimicking what you're doing. right? They're mimicking. They can watch what you're doing and then they're going to do it. And you think they have it and then they leave the room and they forget everything. So what I want you to think about is getting them to tell you once we role play and everything's perfect, you say to them, okay, explain to me what we just changed. Explain to me the new process so that they can explain. The reason is if in case there's a missing step, I can fix it now before I unleash them on my customers. So again, we want to make sure they tell me, well, this is what we used to do. Here's what we do it now. I want to make sure that they understand. Then the very last step is follow-up. Now, for most of these processes, initially when you push your team out to go back and start executing on these, again, depending how quickly they're going to use this new skill, I would make sure your follow-up is pretty close. Maybe in an hour, go check in on them, and then a few times on day one. As you're following up, if things are going well and you're watching them and they're doing it well, then maybe you extend out and say, I only have to check in on them once or twice a day, then once a day. Well, then once every other day. Understand you're never going to stop checking. The minute you stop checking is the minute they don't think it's important anymore and they forget to do it. So maybe it just goes into your regular follow-up process as you're inspecting their performance. Normally, now we have a new thing to look for as well. But we want to hold people accountable. We want to keep coaching them and developing them. So again, if we follow this process, if I go and I see that they've drifted off and they're not doing what we need them to do, it's easy for me to get them back on track because remember, they were doing it in front of me perfectly when we were role playing. They were doing it. The first couple of times they did it and I checked in, they were doing it. Maybe habit, right? Their old habits are fighting against this new change and we got to get them back on track, but it's easier to get me back on track because I did it than if I'm just telling them instead of showing them and making sure. If I'm just telling them, how many times have you had an employee said, oh, is that what you wanted? I thought you meant X. So it's easier to get them back on track. The other key is, again, as we started in the scenario, if somebody comes up and says, Glenn, what should I do? You can say, well, what do we remember from training about that? And then we can uncover, did they just forget what they were supposed to do, retrain, or they've decided that it's not important anymore or their way is better or something else. But then I can have that conversation versus just trying to keep training them over and over and over and over and over again. Well, I hope you found value from this episode. As always, I appreciate your attention. If you got this far, please don't forget to subscribe, share it out. There are a lot of people who could use this information. As always, I appreciate the attention. I appreciate that you come back week in and week out. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. I keep getting a lot of comments from everyone of how much they're enjoying my conversations with my guests or just like this, a little solo episode to make you better. So again, please don't forget to subscribe. Leave your comments as well. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, or what topic you'd like me to talk about. But more importantly, as I end every episode, you're in charge. But now I gave you a new tool to help you become more successful. Thanks again, and I'll see you next episode.